What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Big Freakin Health Coach Podcast. I'm Big Freakin Neil, and I'm joined, of course, as always, every single week, without exception,
Non-stop.
my buddy, my business partner, my brain twin, Health Coach Kane.
Yeah, buddy.
What's up, man?
Dude, times are good.
I keep trying to think of more B's to tack onto that intro, and I'm really struggling. Badass. There's not a lot to draw from there. Barbell lifting.
Really not. Bicep-y.
Yeah.
Bubble butt.
Bootylicious.
All
right,
that's
that's
Beyonce would sue me. That's probably copyrighted somehow, right?
Well, it's going in there for sure.
All right, bootylicious.
Bring it on, Beyonce. Oh, man. What's new? What's new in the life of Health Coach Kane?
Not a lot, man.
Nada?
And I don't have a problem with that. Life is pretty good. I mean, I know that there's still a global pandemic, so it's not perfect.
It can only be so good.
But for what we can do, things are going well.
Yeah.
And clients are doing well. And I'm very fortunate to still be busy with clients. Not
Same.
all trainers are in the same boat, so I think you and I are lucky that way.
Definitely.
No complaints.
Yeah.
Lots of work.
Yeah. Same.
I like work.
Same here, man. I feel like this is gonna expose me as a video game nerd, but oh well. I feel like, if you're playing like an RPG and you've been pulling up some XP points and then you hit that level up point, I feel like I just hit that.
Yeah.
I'm in a new...
Dude, I know exactly how you feel.
It's a great feeling.
I actually use the term level up all the time.
Yeah.
And
It's
a
a
while
perfect
back,
analogy.
Even my wife was like, really level up? And I'm like, yes, life is a game, and I am going to beat it.
Life is Skyrim.
Damn straight.
No, but yeah, the last several weeks just been pulling those XP points, and now I've hit a point where I feel like I'm in a new spot. I've leveled up.
Yeah.
It feels good, man. I attributed a lot of it to my shift in goals, which we touched on a few weeks back. Yeah, just really going hard on trying to get leaner, doing more of an all-out bodybuilding routine at this point. I'm basically pretending that I am 10 to 12 weeks out from a bodybuilding show for no reason, because I'm not.
Because I'm not.
But that's just sort of how I'm operating. Early morning cardio. And still doing some powerlifting style stuff, but a lot more bodybuilding style stuff to go along with it.
Would you say that it's like a strength maintenance program wrapped in a bodybuilding program?
I'd say that's pretty accurate. Yeah, like I've been doing. What I have noticed is between the calorie deficit and the increase in volume, my intensity can't quite be at 100.
Yeah.
I can't quite maintain the same intensity.
Calorie deficits are like that, though.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that is important to note, is that if you are in a calorie deficit, sometimes you're going to be hungry, sometimes you're going to be tired.
I mean, calories are literally energy.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you have less energy, that's because you're eating less
You are
of it.
intentionally giving yourself less energy than you need.
Right.
With a goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But
at a very basic level, yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You're getting less fuel, so it's unreasonable to think that you're going to have the exact same output with less going in. So, but yeah, I feel like just the shift in mindset and the focusing on a new, really, really hard goal has just helped me level up in other areas as well. Especially the cardio thing.
Yeah.
It's really weird because I hate cardio.
Don't we all?
I know, right? But I think that's part of it because I'm starting every day just about with my two least favorite things in the world. Mm-hmm. And that is waking up earlier than I have to. Mm-hmm. I don't normally do that. And cardio. Yeah. I'm starting every day with those two things. But when you start every day with the two things you hate the most, the rest of the day just flows a lot better.
Yeah.
And it puts you in a really good frame of mind to just get down to work. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Like you've done the hurdles for the day already. Everything else is kind of smooth sailing.
This is the worst it's going to be today. At 6:30 in the morning on the treadmill for 45 minutes. That's the worst the day is going to be. So the rest of it's just smooth sailing at that point.
I like that.
Yeah, man.
That's good.
I'm really liking it. I'm liking it a lot. I also, someone who I respect in the bodybuilding world, I expressed these new goals to him, and he told me that that if I kind of gave him a vague body weight goal that I have in my mind, and he told me that if I were to step on stage at a physique show at that weight, I would probably go national and potentially pro, and now that's in the back of my brain.
And you're like,
just sitting there. Just sitting there. Like it's deep in my brain, but it's there. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Generally, when
now
things
that cardio isn't as bad as you thought it would be, maybe this kind of creeps back in. You give yourself a long enough runway, and maybe you try it again.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see, man. Generally, if things make it into my brain, something happens. I end up doing something with it, for sure.
Once it's in, it doesn't come out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or it will come out in some way
as
or another.
As a result, and not just an abandoned idea.
Exactly. But yeah, man, speaking of being in a calorie deficit, I'm feeling a little peckish.
Oh, are you?
We discussed recently that starting every single episode with 300 plus milligrams of caffeine might not be the best for our health, and probably listeners don't want to hear us, sweating and having heart palpitations as we talk every episode.
What?
I don't know. It might not be the best for the...
Is it not great to hear me talk faster and faster and faster and faster over the course of 30 minutes?
I mean, it might be. I don't know.
Who knows?
Comment below and let us know, guys.
somebody's jam right there.
So we decided that we were going to mix it up occasionally and throw in a fitness-related snack to try.
Word.
Which I'm really excited about. Generally, I get pretty hungry while we're going through these podcast sessions, so I'm excited to have a little snacky snack.
Dude, I got you a snacky snack.
Heck yeah, I got you one too, buddy.
All right, you want to see your snacky snack?
I would love to see it.
All right.
What'd you get me?
I like these, and I wanted you to try them.
Okay.
This is a Met RX bar.
Ooh.
They call it the Big 100. It's 30 grams of protein in one bar.
Heck yeah.
And it's cookie dough flavored.
Oh, buddy.
Because I love you.
Oh, buddy.
It is 410 calories.
Okay.
So sorry about that. But there's a lot of...
But it's like a meal replacement.
Yeah, it's a meal replacement. That's exactly what it is. This is like...
Yeah, man.
A post-workout meal replacement.
I'm really excited for that.
Well, for a normal-sized person. Yours might... you might need more protein on top of that.
I also trained legs semi-recently, earlier today, so I'm pretty excited for that.
That's why you're walking like that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also really excited to sit for a hot minute.
Yeah.
So. All right, buddy, I got you a weird one.
Awesome.
You came out the gate so nice to me.
Yeah.
It's called No Cow.
I fundamentally disagree with that stance.
I really like the name. The logo, I think, is like a leaf. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is probably vegan. Yeah, dairy-free. It is chunky peanut butter flavor. All right. Could potentially have have some promise.
Peanut butter is like ketchup for me. I put it on literally everything.
There you go. 190 calories.
All right.
21 grams of protein.
Yeah.
Pretty damn solid.
Yeah.
Pretty damn solid. I'm curious what I did no research. What the
we never do for the
protein source is.
Like read the label as we hand it over.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, so brown rice protein and pea protein.
Oh, good. That's actually, as far as complete plant sources go, yeah, that's solid.
That combo's complete, right?
And it's not just like soy protein. Yeah, that's awesome.
Sweet. Okay.
Good pick.
There you go, buddy. Let's crack these puppies open.
It has a gram of sugar.
Oh my gosh.
How dare you?
You're going to be diabetic by the time you finish it.
Yeah, probably. Legit. None of those energy drinks did it, but this one.
Yeah, exactly. Just the 1 gram. Ooh, buddy.
I really like the texture of this.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's not hard. It's not like weirdly chewy. I don't have to like bite really hard to get through it.
Nice.
And it tastes good.
Nice.
It's peanut butter flavored. What's not to like?
Look, you can't go wrong with peanut butter.
I'm going to give this a solid 4 out of 5.
Nice.
This was a very good pick. Nicely done.
Nice. Even dairy-free and vegan.
Yeah, man. It's called no cow, and usually I'm like, more cow, please.
The more cow, the better. Dude, this is on point. I really want to like crumple this up and put it in cookie dough Halo Top.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Yeah.
the ultimate protein snack right there.
I have definitely brainstormed how to liquefy that before and like mix it into oatmeal and just make it breakfast. 30 grams of protein.
It's not a bad idea.
It'd be like 500 calories. Yeah.
I bet if you like kind of chopped it up and put it in the oats, like before you cook them, and then put some water in there and then cook it, I bet that would work. Just get all melty. I love it, man. I'm gonna go so far as to say 4.4.
Nice.
Really, really solid.
For a protein bar, that is quite the glowing recommendation.
Yeah, it truly is, because let's be real, the net average for protein bars is probably more like a 3.
I was going to say 2. I've never once had a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, man. Thanks, buddy.
Good.
Good
I like
choice. Good snack choice.
New favorite segment.
Same. This is actually making me rethink the whole energy drink thing. We might need to do this every time. So,
Agreed.
as I'm getting through this, what are we talking about today, man?
Oh, buddy. So we had a great question in a previous Q&A a little while back that was, what exercise do you see most butchered in the gym? Our answer was pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
Which got us thinking that it might be helpful to go through movement systems and talk about not just how to properly perform them, but what individualized differences you may have based on your physiology for these movements, and how to accommodate those things so that you can do these things safely and really effectively, and why your cues for a certain movement may be different from someone else's or just change over time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm actually really excited about this. It's like the nitty-gritty stuff
I'm
that
excited about this too.
we really like to nerd out about this stuff a lot.
We do, and I think it's so valuable for so many people, because we've said from the beginning that the goal of this podcast is immediately actionable content, and it doesn't get any more actionable than specific movement systems. Here's everything you need to know.
Yeah.
You know, somebody could be listening on their way to go squat right now, and they're about to get all the information they need to make it a really good session.
Yeah.
So I'm excited, man. Let's dive in. Where to start on? I think our topic today is the squat specifically.
Is the squat.
Yeah. So
This is a good one. And I think the best place to start with any movement is to understand what should move.
yeah.
So when we talk about a squat, you obviously need adequate mobility in your hips, your knees, and your ankles.
Yeah.
And people ignore the ankles a lot. So we'll get to that. But understanding that all 3 of those joints have to move to a certain degree and to varying degrees from one individual to another is really, really important.
Yes. If you look at somebody like me, for example, who has really short baby legs. So I'm 5'10" without shoes on. My wife is 5'3", and our hips are almost in the same spot. I am all torso, 100%. So my squat is going to look vastly different to somebody who is mostly leg and 6 feet tall.
Which is actually me. I'm not 6 feet tall, but like
gonna say, wait a
I
minute.
do have a very like shorter torso
Yeah.
and longer femurs.
Yeah.
So like my upper leg is a lot longer. And you can see in our squats that work best for each other that we are complete opposites.
Yeah.
And like, so for example, Neil being long torsoed and shorter femured, he has a low bar position when he squats, and it's a little bit more hingy. And I have the exact opposite. I tend to do better squatting high bar
Yeah.
and keeping a little bit more upright posture.
Yeah.
And that's just one of many differences that people will have. So if you're on your way to the gym right now, think about your actual genetically inclined physiology. There's nothing you can change about your skeletal structure.
Right.
So working with your skeletal structure to get your optimal squat form is very important. And this can have differences in where you place the bar, how deep you can get into your squat, how wide your stance is, and pretty much whether your knees point in with your narrow stance or point out with your wider stance.
Right.
The only reason that you need to make changes to a squat stance that is comfortable is if you like powerlift and you have to hit a predetermined depth for some reason.
Sure. Even in that case, though, I think there are better ways to go about it than others.
Yes.
Know? If there's a specific stance and like you said, bar position for the squat that just doesn't really work well for you, then just in general, then that should not be the stance that you use to try to get below parallel for a powerlifting meet.
Yeah.
It's just not. So there's definitely an optimal version of the lift if you do need to hit a specific depth or something of that nature.
So when it comes to that, the question becomes, what do I do to figure out my optimal setup?
Sure.
You know, are there self-assessments that you can do movement-wise?
Yeah.
How can I tell that the way I'm standing when I start my squat is appropriate?
Yeah.
One assessment that I do pretty frequently, we always start with movement assessments with an overhead squat assessment and a lunge assessment.
Yeah.
This typically will tell us if you have muscle imbalances or just straight up pain movement problems.
Sure.
If you can stand with a shoulder width stance, hands over your head, and you can squat down to depth and back up without feeling sharp pain anywhere, and without tipping forward, and without your knees caving together, you're already miles ahead of most people. You're starting from a pretty solid
You're a
place.
rock star. Absolutely.
If you do have any of those issues, 9 times out of the 10, it's probably glutes.
Yeah.
Underactive or weak glutes. There are cases where that's not the case, but most of the time that is.
Sure.
So what I would say is once you've figured out that you move okay, you do your overhead squat assessment, nothing hurts.
Yeah.
The next thing I do with people is I back them up to a wall. So you get on hands and knees with your heels against a wall.
Yeah.
And then I have them rock their hips back towards the wall as far as they can without their tail tucking under.
Nice.
Some people, it's usually called butt wink.
Yeah.
You do that.
Yeah.
What it really is a starting from an extension to a flexion pattern.
Yeah.
Where your tailbone tucks under. And the reason generally you want to stay away from that is that can kind of, with heavy loads, grind on the vertebrae in those columns.
Absolutely.
That being said, if you don't feel any pain, if you don't have any movement issues, if it's asymptomatic,
Right.
it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be fine. Any movement issue that's asymptomatic, if you can iron it out, great. If you don't, it doesn't hurt, you're okay.
Yeah.
But that's what I do. And as far as you can get without your butt winking, that is your optimal squat depth.
Yeah.
And if you can get a feel for that while you're against the wall and then translate it into the squat rack, that is a good place to start.
Yeah. I like that, man. Tell me a little bit about your go-to variations and progressions for clients based on those assessments you just talked about. So if somebody does have issues with butt wink or they have trouble getting to depth, what's your go-to sort of starter ultra beginner squat variation for that type of client?
Assuming that they don't have any movement issues or muscle imbalances, typically I will back them down to a goblet squat.
Yep.
Because it is easiest to control the depth that you squat to and where you're building strength if you have the load situated, first of all, in front of you, and second, right up against you and in your midline.
Yeah.
That is the easiest way to control the load.
Yeah.
So I'll do that, and then we'll probably play with stance width and do some things like that. This is where ankle mobility starts to play a role. Real life story. I was in a gym and I was listening to a trainer talk to someone who had a perfectly good looking squat. I was watching this dude squat and his spine stayed neutral. He was getting down to parallel. He had a wide stance to his squat.
Okay.
And there was not a damn thing wrong with it. The bar stayed over the middle of his foot from the side view. And the trainer comes up and says, "Hey, you need to get a narrower stance." And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on with this?"
Yeah, what's the logic behind this?
It's exactly what he said. He goes, "All right, and what's the narrower stance do?" Yeah. And what they said was, well, with a wider stance, you have a higher probability of your knees caving in. Okay. Which is not true. If your knees are going to cave in, your knees are going to cave in. Yeah. It's a weakness or it's not. Right. So he moves his feet closer together. And when you do that, I mean, typically your toes point straight or forward. He starts coming down into a squat, and he can't get quite as deep, which is typical for folks who are comfortable with a wider squat.
For sure.
And he's like, "Well, my ankles are really tight down here." And she goes, "Oh, well, you just need to keep going through that." So when you run out of mobility in one joint and you continue to push your range of motion, you have to make up for that mobility with a different joint. Yep. And in this case, it was his lumbar spine. His whole tail immediately tucked under a lot till he had a very rounded back to get down past parallel. Okay. And this was the horrible position that this trainer had coached this person into. Jeez. And then she had him continue to squat that way. Jeez. Because, quote, "you are supposed to have this width of stance and get to this depth. Yeah. And anything besides that is somehow dysfunctional." Right. This is one of those things that's like, you can tell a young, inexperienced trainer from an older trainer. Yeah. All those hard and fast rules that you think exist when you first start training aren't really real. No. They're all guidelines, and they all just cave to individual customized solutions to these things. Yeah. So that's one of those situations where, like, if that had been the case and he had started in that narrow stance, rounded back area, I would have coached him in the exact opposite direction right back to where he started.
Yes. Absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. I think, I mean, you and I are a good example since we have opposite styles of squatting. It wouldn't make any sense for me to look at your squat and go, "Oh, that's how I'm supposed to squat. I need to squat that way," and vice versa. Right. Just because structurally it doesn't make sense. Like, that's the way that that's our optimal form of squat for the joints that we have and the structure that we have. I think that's a hugely important point. So I really like what you said about the goblet squat. That's my go-to as well. I also really like how that forces the client's core to fire fairly effectively. Yes. Having the load in front of you, if your core is not turned on, you'll basically tip over. Yeah. So it's
you
impossible
will eat it
not
real
to.
Quick.
Yeah, it's impossible not to use your core when you're literally loading in the front of your body. If someone struggles a lot with, another reason someone can kind of struggle with depth, or keeping their weight back on their heels and staying in the right position, can be sort of a mental block of, "Oh, I feel like I'm going to fall backwards." Right. If the client experiences that and that's part of the issue, then I'll also have them goblet squat down to a box. And when they're comfortable with that, and the depth, the height of the box is correct and the depth looks good, then we'll take the box away, and usually that helps out a lot with that mental block.
Big time.
So
the things that have to be there for a squat. Yeah. It's not really, we're making it kind of sound like there's a free-for-all. If it's comfortable, you're probably good.
Sure. Yeah.
The things that do have to be there for a squat would be neutral spine. Yeah. Would be heels have to stay on the ground. Yes. And then you can use whatever range of motion is comfortable, but you do need to be able to drop down so your hips go back, your knees come forward a little bit. That's the other thing that I see a lot of bad coaching on, is that your knees should never come forward of your toes, and that's simply not true.
It's not. Absolutely not. I should also cut in real quick and specify that I said a second ago, weight should stay on your heels. Your heels on the floor is a better way to put it, because for certain individuals, your center of gravity will have to shift forward slightly, and that's okay. That goes along with the knees coming over the toes for some people. Yeah. completely trying to like keep your toes off the floor and just have your heels down, and not rocking forward at all, that just doesn't work for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that's another really important point.
But I mean, that's really it. You need to be able to support your upper body and support the load on your back with a neutral spine.
Yeah.
And you need to keep your heels and your big toes on the ground.
Yeah.
Squat to depth, come back up, and your hips, knees, and toes should point in the same direction. So like your right hip, your right knee, and your right toe should all be lined up. Mm-hmm. Whatever stance width that is fine, as long as they're in line.
Yes, that's the biggest thing. Like you said, if you have a narrow stance and your toes are pointed straight forward, that's fine, but your knees have to do the same thing.
Yes.
If your knees are out or they're caving in, then that's an issue. And same with a wide stance, if you have your toes pointed out, which I do, your knees have to follow the same track.
Yeah.
Your knees should not be straight ahead if your toes are out. Yeah. That's a big one. I think that those are all things that definitely need to be there. When you say squat to depth, so what is a good standard goal for somebody just starting, getting into squatting, to shoot for on depth? Because that is a very individual thing.
I say squat as low as you comfortably can.
Yeah.
That's usually enough for people to find a depth that is around parallel. Sure. It's very rare that I find someone who just drops all the way to the bottom. I am not a fan of what they call ass to grass squats. Same. I think that's a fantastic way to screw up your low back a little bit and really put a ton of pressure on your knees.
Sure.
I'm not saying it'll injure you today, but if you're looking for lifelong joint-friendly lifting, that's probably not the way to go.
Probably not the best.
So that's all it really takes. And people will either be just above parallel or at parallel or barely below parallel. It depends on their individual hip mobility.
Sure.
Which can also be a huge skeletal factor.
Absolutely.
We touched on it briefly last time we talked about this, but at the top of your femur, there is a neck that goes out to a femoral head, and that's the thing that pops into the socket in your hip.
Yeah.
And that socket's called, what is it, acetubulum, I think. And that has different depths to it too. You can have a shallow one, you can have a deep one. The way those pieces are made for each individual is different, and they can be vastly different.
Yeah. And
in all different combinations. So you can have a really long femoral head and then a really shallow socket. If that's the case, you probably have bomb hip mobility.
Yeah.
If you got a short femoral head and a really deep socket, you probably have garbage hip mobility.
Sure.
And that means you may not be able to squat all the way to parallel without compensating with another joint somewhere, like your low back. And that's okay. If you're not powerlifting or Olympic lifting or something like that, no one cares.
Absolutely. And I would say too, so I do coach some competitive powerlifters, and if you want to be a competitive powerlifter, you do have to squat to a certain depth, but the solution becomes what stance and what all the other factors, what's the ideal way for you to squat to hit that depth comfortably.
Yes.
If you do have structural things like that, then there are ways around that. If you have trouble squatting to depth now, that doesn't mean you can never be a powerlifter, if that's a goal of yours. But there is an optimal way to do it, and there's a not optimal way to do it.
Right. So typically it takes a lot of tweaking, and
yes.
What I've found in the past, and I haven't trained powerlifters, but in general population folks, if they have trouble getting to parallel with a narrower stance, a wider stance will usually help.
Yes.
It just opens up your hips in such a way that you can get a little bit deeper. That also means that the ratio of which muscles are working during your squat changes a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you've been squatting with a narrow stance and then today you decide, I want to be a power lifter, but to get down to parallel, I have to use a wider stance, there might be some strength that you have to rebuild because of the change in your setup.
Yeah.
And it's worth the work. I mean, definitely do it. If that's what you want to do, go for it.
Absolutely.
But don't expect to lift the same exact weight if you're using a different setup.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction to make too, that a lot of the stuff is actually anatomical, because a lot of people hear mobility issues and they think, I just need to do X many of stretches and I'll be good. Yeah. I think that's the typical average train of thought. if there are issues with mobility. But really, it might just be your skeleton.
And you can never mobilize bone.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
There's no way to stretch out your bones.
There are one or two things that may cause mobility issues as far as like having really tight psoas muscles, which are the deep hip flexors in the front of each thigh, up into that hip. That's something that you can stretch with a half kneeling stretch. It takes some time. But at the same time, those are overactive and tight for a reason. You probably have weak glutes that go along with that. Yeah. Maybe you have weak abs that contribute to the tension there. Yeah. There are a couple things that way that you can do. There are some just basic mobility movements like deep lunges or Spider-Man lunges that you can gently try to get into and see if that's a range of motion you actually possess or if it's just because you've been sitting at a desk for 50 hours a week.
Right.
So there are some things that you can try and kind of sort through. But if you can't get into a deep squat without your low back curling all the way under, it's your bones, man.
Yeah.
It's very rare that that's just a muscular issue.
Yeah, 100%. It also goes back into our episode a few weeks ago when we talked about how strength is everything. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, issues with mobility and range of motion are just weakness. Yeah. It's not just tight muscles, it's weak muscles. So identifying that and focusing on strengthening those muscles, I mean, that could be the difference maker. Yeah. That could be really what you need to focus on.
And that's what corrective exercise is. Yeah. You listen to every trainer thinks they're a freaking corrective exercise specialist now, all of them, and they do just bullshit physical therapy stuff that they're not supposed to be doing. Right. As an actual corrective exercise specialist, let me tell you, it's strength training for one muscle at a time. That's really all it is. Yeah. Like, here is an underactive thing you have. We are going to try to inhibit the opposing muscle, activate the underactive one, and then we have a chance to make it stronger. Right. And that's all it is. It's not more complicated than that. It is not physical therapy by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. It's targeted strength training.
Yeah. So what, in the context specifically of the squat, what is your go-to corrective exercise for people with these issues?
Most of the time, and it depends. This may not be for you. Don't take it as a prescription or a diagnosis because I've never met you out there. I've never seen you move. Yeah. But most of the time, there's either psoas tension like we talked about or rectus femoris tension, which is the middle quad muscle. Okay. That's the only quad muscle that actually goes through both your knee and hip joint, and you see a lot of tension there in runners and cyclists and people like that. Yeah. Pretty much endurance activity. Yeah. You can stretch and roll those things, and it's almost the exact same stretch. You put one knee down directly under your hip, you put your other knee up with your foot up front, so you're kneeling on one knee, and then you squeeze the glute on the side that the knee is down. So like if you have your left knee on the floor, you squeeze your left glute, you pull your abs in, and that should stretch all that stuff. And if it doesn't, you just pull that left heel up to your butt, and it lengthens that rectus femoris muscle. Nice. So we do that. And then we do a whole bunch of either lateral banded walks or single leg glute bridges to fire up each glute. And then from there, you do some heavier or longer setted glute work and really get your glutes firing. Nice. And that works so quickly a lot of times. Like in my initial assessment of people, we'll do the overhead squat and they'll be really leaning forward or rolling up onto their toes. We'll do a reverse lunge assessment. And these are standard that I do with everybody, and they'll have a lot of trouble keeping their knees in line or a lot of trouble with their balance. I'll make them stretch and fire up their glutes. Most of those problems go away for the next set. Yeah. It is so immediate. Yeah. Just to activate those underactive muscles. Mm-hmm. And like you'll find that. It's not that they're even weak, it's just that they're asleep.
Right. Yeah, sometimes it's just as simple as turning them on. Yeah. Getting them working.
So that's usually my go-to. And as far as progressions for that movement go, since you asked that a million years ago and I gave you like one, and was like, other stuff.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. It can be a really complex subject. There's a lot of different ways that it can go.
Absolutely.
But typically I go from bodyweight squat to goblet squat. Then I'll do a kettlebell front squat. Okay. So 2 kettlebells held in front of you.
Like it.
And that really cranks up the abdominal engagement for that same movement, so it makes it ever so slightly more difficult. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I'll put them into a back squat. Yeah. But you got to earn your way up to having a bar on your back.
Absolutely. and I'm not even going to bother going through it because mine's identical. That's exactly what I do. If someone is really, really, really limited, like I've had some special cases, for example, I had a client with progressive MS and super limited. So for certain people where a bodyweight squat is just simply too much for them mechanically, a further regression from the list you just gave would be like a TRX supported squat.
Yeah.
Where you're actually getting assistance off of your body weight. That would mean holding on to a set of TRX straps and then performing a body weight squat with the support of the TRX.
Yes.
That's the only thing I'd add. And then other than that, yeah, I think you nailed it.
I mean, I might put a box squat in between that and the next thing sometimes, depending on the person.
Sure.
But yeah, and I've also used that TRX supported squat for people with just dead ass asleep glutes.
Yeah.
Because you can really sit back into that and feel how your glutes are supposed to engage during that movement.
Yeah.
They usually don't need it very long. Once you get the feeling for it, it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's true, unless it is a very specialized case like the one I use as an example. If it's strictly for an issue like that, usually it's only a couple sessions that they're even using the TRX.
Yeah.
And then they're right onto either a bodyweight box squat or just an air squat at that point. So, yeah, man, I think that gives people a pretty damn good guide for getting started on squatting or just improving their squat if they've been having issues up to this point.
Absolutely.
So
besides the progression we just gave, since we just talked about it, what do you think the takeaways are now that someone's parked at their gym?
Yeah.
They're going to go squat today. Mm-hmm. We said neutral spine.
Neutral spine.
Knees tracking in line with your toes and hips. Heels and big toe on the floor. And then whatever depth is comfortable.
Yeah. And I would say those are the biggest takeaways. And I would say the place to start, if you are already squatting regularly and you are experiencing some of these issues, is foot position.
Yeah.
That is and knee position along with that. That is exactly the place that you should start tweaking if you do find these issues are coming up for you.
Because there's no right or wrong answer universally for that.
Yeah.
Try a wide stance, try a narrow one, try something in between. And I think the best way to experiment with that is a goblet squat, just because you can still feel how comfortable your hips are and your depth and range of motion. Yeah. But if for some random reason something hurt, it's really easy to dump that weight.
Yes, absolutely. I also think it's good to have some type of small load when experimenting rather than just a body weight squat.
Yeah, you can get your body weight to do a lot of things that it doesn't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it might not be enough load to actually feel if there is an issue.
Right.
You might not even be able to tell.
Yeah.
So, yeah, goblet squat is a great means of experimentation. And if you are on a program where you're doing back squats, then use that goblet squat as a warm-up, play around with your stance, and then translate that over to your back squat as you work up.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
All right. I think everyone's ready to squat.
I think so. All right. This has been... Wow, that went by quick.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, let's do more of these.
That was a meaty topic.
Meaty. All right, I'm Health Coach Kane. This is Big Freakin' Neil, teaching you how to squat big old heavy weight and not get hurt while doing it. Please, if you liked this, send us another movement system or exercise you want us to go through. We are happy to. Hit us up on Instagram in the DMs.
Yeah, if we missed something about squatting specifically that you're experiencing, definitely message us.
Oh, for sure. We would love to talk more about this. Mm-hmm. And that is it this week for the Big Freakin' Health Coach podcast. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, give us a 5-star review and share it with all your friends.
Yes, please.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
See you next time.